All right, let's jump right into this explainer and unpack one of the absolute most chilling legends in Indonesian folklore, the story of Alas Roban. Now, we're not talking about your run-of-the-mill, cheap jump scares today. Oh no, we're going to dive deep into how this story literally weaponizes the human mind. It takes a mother's fiercest love and her deepest anxieties and just twists them into a complete psychological nightmare. As we'll see, everything is manipulated here: the environment, the characters' identities, and even their very senses.
To really get this, we have to frame the whole story around a pretty terrifying question. I mean, if a physical monster is chasing you through the woods, you just run, right? But what are you supposed to do when your own reality starts to fracture? When you literally cannot trust what you see, what you hear, or even what you remember? That's the true horror of Alas Roban. It's all about psychological dread. It completely breaks your mind way before it ever lays a finger on your body.
Which brings us to Section 1, The Cursed Forest Road.
So, our story kicks off with a desperate mother named Sita and her daughter Gendis, who is severely visually impaired. Sita takes a new job at a hospital morgue far away just to afford a life-changing eye surgery for Gendis, and this forces them onto a sketchy, ill-fated private night bus. And the route? It goes right through the notoriously dense Alas Roban forest. This is a place locals will tell you to avoid at all costs. And you know, the terror doesn't kick off with some massive monster attack. It starts with just confusion. A passenger suddenly realizes they've driven past the exact same Alas Roban sign twice. They're stuck in a loop. Then, out of nowhere, the terrified driver slams on the brakes because he's hallucinating bloody handprints just violently smashing against the windshield. And when the bus finally breaks down, Sita and Gendis wander into a phantom food stall deep in the woods. But the people there, they're eating in this dead, eerie silence. No talking, just staring. The environment itself is warping their reality, building up this overwhelming dread before a single physical threat even shows up.
Moving on to Section 2, The Uncanny Valley.
Okay, so Sita and Gendis manage to get out of the forest and find refuge in the city with Sita's cousin, Tika. Safe, right? Well, not exactly. The horror totally follows them home, but it shifts. It goes from this creepy external environment to the internal, psychological unraveling of little Gendis herself, and the contrast is just uncanny. Think about it. Sita knows her daughter as this sweet, fearful girl who can barely see 2 feet in front of her. But suddenly, she finds Gendis sitting at a table, effortlessly drawing these incredibly detailed, perfect sketches of the Alas Roban forest and that creepy bus. When Sita asks her about it, Gendis' voice drops. It becomes heavy, cold, and distinctly not hers. As a parent, watching your deeply vulnerable child be seamlessly replaced by something so unnatural, that is peak psychological terror.
Things totally reach a breaking point during what's supposed to be just a normal game of hide-and-seek. Tika's trying to calm Gendis down, but the little girl starts moving weirdly, slinking into the shadows. When Tika tries to gently grab her to stop the game, Gendis shoves her with this impossible, terrifying strength, completely shattering a glass table. And as Tika is bleeding on the floor, Gendis just looks at her. Her eyes turn pitch black, she flashes this horrific smile, and she whispers, "I am not Gendis." Boom! The illusion of being safe in their own home is completely obliterated.
And that leads us right into Section 3, Illusions and Mind Games.
As if stealing a child's identity wasn't twisted enough, the entity starts totally dismantling their sanity with these terrifying hallucinations. Gendis starts having nightmares where her bedroom closet literally opens up into the dark forest, and that mysterious crowned woman from the food stall is standing there, calling out to her. But the entity isn't just messing with the kid. It's actively torturing the mother. There's this agonizing moment where Sita wakes up and Gendis is crying, saying her mother doesn't love her because she's blind. Then, in a horrific fit of rage, Gendis violently tries to gouge her own eyes out. Sita screams in absolute terror, and then snaps awake. It was a hallucination. The true danger isn't physical here. The entity is explicitly weaponizing Sita's absolute worst fears about her daughter's visual impairment.
So, who or what is actually orchestrating all this madness? Let's get into Section 4, The Wrath of Dewi Raras.
We find out from a local expert, Mrs. Emma, that there's a really tragic history behind all this. Dewi Raras wasn't always this evil monster. Originally, she was a sacred guardian spirit of the forest. But hundreds of years ago, during an era of extreme tyranny and slavery, rulers used her peaceful woods as a massive dumping ground for literally thousands of human corpses. Just centuries of absorbing all that death, sin, and trauma completely corrupted her. All that historical pain essentially mutated a protective guardian into a vengeful force, one that traps travelers' minds in her twisted, inescapable reality.
But even in the middle of all this psychological darkness, the lore throws us a lifeline. We have a huge contrast to Duiraris, and that is the white tiger. Throughout all the chaos, Sita keeps seeing visions, first a white monkey, and later a majestic white tiger. These are mythical guardian spirits that represent pure protection. It's a really fascinating detail because it highlights these warring psychological symbols baked right into the legend. You've got corruption clashing with purity, and deep despair battling it out with hope.
Which brings us to the climax, Section 5, the ultimate sacrifice.
At this point, Gendis' soul is actively being dragged into the spirit world by Dewi Raras. Medical science? Useless. Traditional prayers? They completely failed. Sita realizes she literally has to fight on a spiritual battlefield, so she willingly puts herself into a deep trance. And the juxtaposition here is just wild. Out in the physical world, Sita is lying completely unconscious on the forest floor, while a frantic ritual happens around her. But inside her mind, in the spirit world, it's sheer chaos. She is running through an endless, thick fog. She's dodging phantom buses that just vanish into thin air. And when she looks down, the ground is completely covered in human skulls, a horrifying visual callback to the forest's dark history as a dumping ground.
And of course, Dewi Raras doesn't stop her vicious mind games. Sita hears her daughter crying out. She runs toward the voice, full of hope, but freezes in pure terror. The spirit turns around, and sure, it looks exactly like Gendis, but her eyes are entirely missing. It is such a cruel, sickening illusion, meticulously designed to break a mother's resolve by exploiting the one thing she fears the most.
In this absolutely heartbreaking final sequence, the white tiger spirit finally intervenes and guides Sita to the true Gendis. And in the spirit world, Gendis' eyes are actually perfectly healed. They grab each other and sprint toward this massive glowing gate, the portal back to the living world. But right before they cross, Dewi Aras intercepts them and claims Gendis' soul. In that moment, falling to her knees, Sita makes the ultimate bargain. She offers her own life, her own soul, as a permanent sacrifice so her daughter can go free.
Dewi Raras is actually stunned. She hasn't seen a selfless act like this in centuries, so she accepts the deal. She lets the child go. And here is where the heavy emotional anchor of the whole explainer really drops. The exact millisecond Sita makes this psychological bargain in the spirit realm, her physical body back in the real world goes cold. Her heart just stops. One life perfectly and permanently exchanged for another.
A few days later, we get this incredibly tragic resolution. Gendis finally undergoes the eye surgery her mother worked so desperately to afford, and the operation is a total success. Gendis wakes up and her vision is completely restored. But the crushing irony here? The very first thing she sees clearly in this world isn't her mother smiling down at her. It's just a photograph of the mother who gave absolutely everything to make it happen.
Which leaves us with a really heavy final thought. Sita won the battle, right? She saved her daughter's life, and she saved her sight. But what is the true psychological cost to the survivor? Gendis now has to walk through life carrying the massive weight of that sacrifice, alongside the haunting memories of a twisted realm she'd barely managed to escape. The mind games of Alas Roban might be over for Sita, but for Gendis, that psychological trauma is something that will last a lifetime. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. It really makes you think about the true depths of psychological horror, doesn't it? Until next